like everything, it was feeling all normal, and then just a bubble started, and as soon as I saw it, I pulled out and it blew. And just, it knocked me back a few feet for sure.
Wow.
Took me a minute to realize what the hell was going on. I was like,
I'm tired again
yeah,
now.
I was like, I have not ever been hit that hard before. But I did not want to get stuck in the woods where there was, CB wasn't working.
Yeah.
Those guys that were helping me were long gone, and it was a long walk out.
Yep, been there many
You
times.
know, no, we can go downhill and make it work.
Is he gone tonight?
I don't think so.
I think he's there. It's not 6 yet, so.
I think the clock's off actually.
My computer says 6.
I did too, that's why I was like,
He's got a minute.
Hang up on it.
Yeah, we're just doing a lot of
Portion, and I'll do mine.
logging roads with Weyerhaeuser. Their crew would just leave, and we'd still, like on Friday, we'd have to grease the truck and stuff. And everybody's, you're the last one up here. You better use all the safety gear you can.
I'm out there a few times on my own. Usually I go a little bit slower. And costs what it costs. If you're gonna leave me out here by myself, I ain't gonna.
Exactly.
Not in a hurry.
Yeah, you got that box up in the air, and you gotta get in there, so you gotta put the safety bar down, and,
since it's waiting for us, does that mean?
because no one's coming back until Monday.
Oh, no, there's a lot.
Okay.
At least it's early, but it's still ain't Monday.
Yeah.
It's still Monday.
It won't probably spin up for a couple more minutes.
Okay.
You wanna start?
If you guys are ready?
Yep. I'm sure Alonzo's just running a few behind.
I thought his truck was out there. Maybe I mistook someone else's truck for his.
Thanks, everybody, for coming to the Creswell City Council Work Session Agenda, May 27, 2025. Let's pledge allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we'll just assume Alonzo will be here. He's not here right now, but I assume he'll be here and just run behind. So first thing is committee reports. And Alan, Parks and Tree Committee.
Joan.
Joan? That's right, we switched.
Oh, we
Joan?
did? Oh, I was not prepared to give a report on the Parks and Trees Committee.
I can give a real brief summary. of the
Yeah, I went to
report.
the one meeting
Yep.
and,
Joan was at the meeting.
Okay.
yeah, that was my first meeting.
Yeah.
Good job. You
We're
made it.
meeting again on June 10th at 09:30.
Okay, so there's half the battle.
Okay, there you go.
And basically, they kind of summarized the Arbor Day activities.
Yes.
They felt pretty good about the displays that were out there. They were a little short. According to the duck truck, they were about half the crowd of last year. And so whether it was weather, whether it was conflicts with other things, they don't know. But it really was a nice event. I enjoyed being out there. And so they're also talking about their priorities for spending money which was plugged into the budget process for this coming year. And the other project that they requested was to initiate that work on a bridge to make that a loop trail instead of 2 dead-end trails, which council included in the budget the budget committee included in the budget last meeting. So I think those were the
Highlights,
well, Joan was the highlight, but the rest of it
Of course.
was, yeah.
obviously. Okay, so you said next meeting was when?
The 10th of June.
And then next would be administrative and finance would be Alonzo, and I know he said he had a short one, but we could probably come back to that.
And I think he just wanted to remind people about their court observation dates.
So everybody got their court date in mind or on the calendar?
I forget when mine is.
Joan and I think are the same day, so we just gotta sit
What,
apart from.
July
each other.
something?
Yeah, July 7th.
Oh, we were switching the July to August though.
I missed it again.
I thought that's what we switched to.
We
We
resigned
switched
that.
to, oh, yes, you're in
I'll
July,
send
I'm in
out
August.
email.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, that's
Okay.
right.
So I'm in July with you, we'll just
Yeah,
sit on
'cause I've
opposite
never
sides.
done this, so
I
I'm
usually
not
bring-
sure how
I
to-
usually bring my kids.
How to
hopefully,
comport
when I show.
myself.
You just sit in the back and
Shut up.
pretty much you're just observating, writing some notes down and,
Okay.
yeah, calling a day and hopefully we'll get lucky and it won't be, it'll either be super fun or short, sweet and hard to beat.
Fun would be fun.
Fun's good. Okay, everybody else got their court dates then, or have done them already? Okay. Sweet, we'll just go to discussion items, and we'll go to A, total maximum daily load, TMDL, Curtis and Cliff.
Thank you all. So TMDL, total maximum daily load, is kind of more simply a water quality plan that DEQ requires us that we submit every single year. And so it's just kind of a reporting mechanism where we look at mercury, temperature, bacteria, and all pollutants that are in our waterway. And it's mostly just us reporting our kind of ongoing items, and so some of this would fall under planning, like zoning, code, enforcement, like in our wetlands jurisdictions. This might be following up on our wastewater treatment plant rules with DEQ, and this also trickles down to our street sweeping that we outsource every year to help keep our stormwater clean. So that's kind of high level. We did receive approval this year from DEQ in our analysis, and it's just kind of an easy way to meet some statewide requirements. And I'll let Cliff speak to some of the more specific items that our public works teams acts on.
Good evening, council. Chris and I kind of gang up on this. This is a requirement from DEQ. He kind of does the administrative side. Public Works does the kind of boots on ground work. And so we kind of team up on this. The city is the DRC, which is direct responsible charge for stormwater runoff within the city limits. And so one of the requirements is we have to annually submit this TMDL sheet, and you can look in there, and there's items in there that we have to continue to work on and make progress, and then annually we report back. And one of those items is we have to present it to city council so that you can keep us on our toes and make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. I think that's what the intent of this is. So a few of the things that we work on, and the purpose of this is to limit the amount of waste that goes into our storm stream. It goes out to the coast fork of the Willamette River, and then obviously goes down to our friends downstream. So we're tasked with trying to keep our storm water as clean as possible. So some of the kind of particulars, and you guys can read it, but kind of highlights is we provide doggy waste stations and doggy bags so that folks can pick up after their pets. We provide a leaf pickup program so that those leaves don't make it down into the catch basins and ultimately out into the river. We contract with street sweeping, kind of same thing there, pick up all the street sweepings. We clean catch basins annually, and we have to report back on how many we've cleaned for the year. We require erosion control at all construction sites, and we have to do inspections there and make sure that they're keeping their sites clean. Make sure they have all the correct permitting and that sort of thing. We've labeled catch basins and make sure folks know that the drains to the downstream, you can't put items in there that aren't allowed. So those are kind of the highlights. And like I said, just tonight, this is a presentation to council. This is what we're doing. There are some items in there that require budgeting. So there's some monies expended towards this. Most of it's out of streets, but some of it's out of wastewater. So that's what this is tonight, so that you guys are aware of what we're doing, and we're keeping our commitment with DEQ.
Awesome. Councilors, any questions? Comments?
Nope, I saw a printout of it, of the report, and it looked like everything's within normal limits, if you want to put it like that.
Yeah, those are the items that we're required to annually track and work on through the year.
Do you have something that's actually keeping like a KPI, like where you're at on this?
No,
Like,
that
seeing,
is,
like what your results are.
that is our reporting requirement. So if you look at the end of it, it kind of has timelines and measures.
Yeah.
And that's where we track where we're at on it.
Okay.
And some of them are just annually and continuing, like street sweeping, we never stop,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Okay.
Do you have a, don't the city have a street sweeper?
No, we
Oh, we
contract
don't.
that. Yeah, we contract that out.
Bless you. Anyone else? Thanks, sirs.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, discussion item B, pre-implementation compliance measures, floodplain. Curtis.
Okay. So no action is required on this item. So staff, we kind of decided to pause the floodplain code update. That was response to a regulation that FEMA was imposing. And so some of you were here, I know there's new counselors, so in November, as a council, as a city, we chose to do this permit by permit option, which was in response to FEMA getting sued by some environmental agencies. And so what happened was there were environmental groups that sued FEMA that said that the way that they administered the National Flood Insurance Program was in fact endangering species. And so that trickles down to Creswell because we are a National Flood Insurance Program city. And so FEMA's response to that lawsuit was to require that cities basically enforce more restrictive regulations on their housing, on their development within the floodplain. And so they kind of gave cities a couple options. You can either say no development on your floodplain, or you can pick the permit by permit approach, or you can adopt the model ordinance. And we are kind of adopting the permit by permit approach, which is kind of like permit by permit / model ordinance. But anyways, in FEMA requiring local jurisdictions to make these changes, they've kind of been countersued. In Oregon, we have a local land use process that requires that development code changes are noticed, and it goes through planning commission, it goes through city council, and these things take time. And the timeline for these changes was incredibly expedited, and it really didn't give staff a lot of time to review what the outcomes would be of making these changes. And some of the other items that FEMA was sued for go a little bit beyond my knowledge, but in consulting with our attorney group, not Ross, but our attorneys that Ross works with, we were advised that it might be appropriate to delay these floodplain changes. And so the risk is that FEMA has kind of threatened that if we don't make our floodplain overlay code changes by July 31st, then they may revoke our flood insurance program in Creswell. That's a pretty scary item. That's just kind of the risk of the pause. But across Oregon, there have been some jurisdictions that have done nothing in response to these FEMA implementation measures, and there hasn't been a single community with revoked insurance. And so in talking with a city attorney, like, while yes, there is a risk that we should all be aware of, the risk is quite low. And I would kind of argue that the greater risk is to adopt development code changes that will have to be changed in 4 months' time. It's kind of a waste of time. And so the hearing for FEMA's process suit, I don't know if that's the correct phrase, is on the 29th, so it's in a couple days. And then we expect that a decision will happen anytime from 1 to 3 weeks following the hearing. And then from there, our floodplain manager, myself, our attorneys will kind of review what the changes will be, and then we'll kind of come back to council with a revised plan. Stacy?
When did FEMA give that deadline? Was that back in November?
Prior to November, yeah.
It was prior. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so maybe about a year.
Yeah, it just, a lot has changed.
Yes, yeah.
And so that's why I asked, thank you.
Yeah, it's been a lot to try to keep track of, and so it's kind of been nice that we outsource our floodplain manager to Cottage Grove with our IGA, and it's been a lot of work for floodplain managers. And just to provide additional confidence, I've spoke with some other jurisdictions. Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County are also pausing any code update. So to me, that provides me with some confidence that what we're doing is within the realm of acceptable. And in your packet, show the steps that we've made so far to kind of comply with FEMA. So we've kind of operated in good faith so far. And but if the rules are going to change in 2 weeks, we kind of see it to be prudent to pause.
Yeah.
Are you needing any guidance from us tonight on continuing with what you're doing, or?
No.
Okay.
I think the big thing is if the council was really.
This is just
concerned about
informational
the
only.
July-
You don't need us to say continue doing what you're doing or change direction.
We're gonna do nothing unless council says, no, we should try to meet this July 31st deadline, so.
Do the nothing, I think.
Okay, if everyone's comfortable with
I
that.
vote for nothing.
I think nothing for
I
the
like
council,
nothing.
yeah, okay. Keep up the good work. Do nothing, do nothing.
Thanks for navigating that for us.
I'm sure that's a lot with FEMA. I'm
It's,
sure.
it's an exciting opportunity when the best option is to do nothing. To take something off the list.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Curtis. All right, next discussion item is C. Ross is gonna whip through this like nobody's
Right.
business.
Start the timer.
Marathon.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
And Ross, I think the only council member you haven't met is Mark, who came in January as well. so.
Okay.
All right, good evening, everyone. I have 45 minutes. Let the record show.
Gonna bill it?
Am I an attorney?
That's what I thought.
So my name is Ross Williamson. I work in Eugene at the local government law group, and we are 8 attorneys who specialize in advising small cities and other government entities like fire districts. We also work with South Lane. And so all 8 of us work exclusively in government, and so this is all we do. And one of the things we do is we try to go out and provide some training on these issues. And so this is going to be a pretty high-level training because we're only allocating 45 minutes. And just for some context in that realm, if you were going to go to a Government Ethics Commission training on just ethics, they will spend at least 90 minutes on just ethics and can go longer. And they have a new public meetings training that's over 2 hours. So that's just putting what we're going to do tonight in context. And so I'm not going to answer all the questions. And so the hope tonight is to flag some issues for you, give you kind of an overview of the law on these issues. And if you see something, say something, ask a question. And so, when you're out doing your job as a city councilor, as the mayor, you'll say, I think Ross mentioned something about that. I better slow down and reach out to the city manager or reach out to Ross and get an answer. So that's the high level purpose of the meeting or my presentation tonight. There are a couple handouts in the packet, and those are both from the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. One is a one-pager that just kind of describes their jurisdiction, the different pieces of ethics law that they govern, and the other is a specific 2-pager that talks about conflicts of interest. And so for today, we're going to stick to 3 subjects, and again, we're not going to go super in depth, but I'm going to try to hit the high points here. And so we're going to open up with ethics, then we're going to talk about public meetings, and there's some new law on public meetings we can talk about, or at least recent law, and then very quickly we're going to talk about public records. So the first topic, ethics, and I am going to give you 3 rules for a public official in ethics. And the first thing we have to do is we have to learn some definitions. So there are 3 definitions here that we're going to talk about in ethics. And the first one is public official. The second one is a relative. And the third one is a business with which you are associated. So we're going to talk about public official, relative, and business. And those are important because the rules of ethics govern all 3 of those things. So you have to watch out for more than just yourself. You have to watch out for your relatives and the businesses with which you are associated. So first up, first definition, a public official. A public official is all of you, elected officials, appointed officials, so that would be like budget committee members who are appointed to those positions, planning commissioners, employees, so your employees here are public officials, and volunteers. So folks who are, like our fire department here in town has some volunteers, and so volunteer firefighters are public officials. The second definition that we talked about is relative. And relative means, it's pretty broad, but it's not excruciatingly broad, but it is still pretty broad, so, and it's more than one slide. So when we talk about a relative, so you are a public official, and we have to talk about you and your relatives. So it's your spouse, your children, your brother or stepbrother, your sister, your parents, your step-parents, your son-in-law, your daughter-in-law, anyone for whom the public official, you, has a legal support obligation. So if you were in a divorce and you have a support obligation maybe to your ex-spouse, that would still apply. So your ex-spouse could be a relative under the law. And then anyone else who benefits from your employment benefits. So maybe you have someone in your household who lives with you who isn't officially a relative, but you provide health insurance to that person under your employment health insurance plan. So that would be a relative as well. So again, not super broad, because we're not talking about second cousins and stuff, but broad enough, right? And I'm just the messenger here. These are my rules. So we'll just stick to that, huh? All right. So we talked about public official, you. We talked about your relatives, and now we're going to talk about business with which you are associated. And a business with which you are associated is any private business in which you are the owner, director, or employee. So if you have a boss, if you work for a company, then that is a business with which you are associated. If you are wealthy and own $100,000 of a publicly held corporation, so if you have $100,000 of Apple stock, then Apple would be a business with which you are associated. And then lastly, if you file, or you all do, you file your statement of economic interest, and if more than 10% of your total household income comes from a particular business, even if it doesn't fit within one of those other categories, that would be a business with which you are associated. So if you receive maybe dividends, some folks are retirees and they still receive dividends from a company they used to work for. And if it's more than 10% of your income, then that would be a business with which you are associated. And again, these definitions are important because in these ethics rules, you're looking after yourself as a public official. So you want to make sure you're not doing something wrong, but you also have to be in tune with what your relatives are doing and experiencing because of your decisions, and what the businesses with which you are associated are experiencing because of your decisions. So for instance, if you're making a decision there on the dais and it would benefit you yourself financially, that's a problem. If it would benefit your spouse, that would be a problem. And if it would benefit your employer, that would be a problem. So we're looking at 3 different levels here. Rule number 1, don't use your position for personal gain. So that's a pretty simple summary of a pretty complex statute, and we're gonna go into the statute. We lawyers call this the but-for test. So rule number 1 is the but-for test, and the test says a public official, that's you, a city councilor or a mayor, cannot use your position to get money or to avoid losing money for you, your relative, a member of your household, and a business. That business is not in the slide, but that includes a business with which you're associated, if that opportunity would not be available but for, got a little checkbox, but for your position. All right, what does that really mean? Examples help. So The classic example I've used before, because it's just so trivial, I guess, in my eyes. So Public Works has a pressure washer. It's sitting in the Public Works yard. They use it sporadically to pressure wash things. You have, I'll just pick on the mayor, because that you know,
Why not?
you have a driveway that needs cleaning. And so the mayor goes over to Public Works and says, hey, Cliff, can I borrow the pressure washer? Cliff is like, yeah, I'm not using it. No one's using it today. No one's gonna use it tomorrow. If you break it, you buy it, fill it up with gas when you bring it back. All right? So there's no cost to the city for the mayor using that pressure washer. But the only reason he gets to use it is because he's a city councilor and Cliff says, oh, here's the mayor. The mayor wants to use the pressure washer. So I better say yes. And I wouldn't say yes to anyone else because they're just anyone else. So the mayor, a public official, is avoiding losing money because otherwise he would have to rent one. So he doesn't have to rent one, and so he's avoiding losing money because he, the public official, is taking advantage of his position. But for his position, he wouldn't get the pressure washer. So even if there's no harm to the public, and the city doesn't care, Cliff could really care less. He's not going to use it. In fact, maybe he rarely uses it. In fact, the mayor's going to return it full of gas. That's better than it came to him. So no harm to the city at all. No harm to the public. But the only reason, the but for here, is because he was mayor, he got it for free and didn't have to rent it. So the question you get to ask yourself out in the public, out in the real world, is, am I getting this benefit because I'm a city councilor? So we've talked about Stacy and her free drinks. She gets a free pop, and she only gets a free pop because she is a city councilor. I'm lying. That's not the truth.
Never know
Just
who
for
will
the
run with
record.
that.
That's right. This is a hypothetical. So if a councilor walks into a convenience store and there's a big sign that says free soda fountain drink for any councilor, that should be, you should, back out of the, and say, the only reason I'm getting this free pop is because I'm a city councilor. Of course, that's a pretty obvious example, but, so that's just one of those things. If something comes up, ask a question. Reach out to staff. Staff can reach out to me, and we'll get that answered for you. All right, what does this not include? So this rule number 1, don't use your position for financial gain. There are some exceptions. So you can get reimbursed. So if you travel to the League of Oregon Cities meeting in Salem, you're doing that in your official capacity as the mayor or as a city councilor, the city can reimburse you for that travel, and that's okay. Even though the only reason you're getting reimbursed is because you're a city councilor. That's the but for. The only reason you're getting mileage reimbursement is because you went to a city meeting out of town. But there's an exception for that. You can get an unsolicited award. So if you receive a plaque for being on city council, as we often do, we give our retired or outgoing city councilors, sometimes we give them a plaque, or our mayor. You can receive a plaque to commemorate your service. Even though the only reason you're getting it is because you're a public official, but that is not a problem. All right, that was rule 1. Rule number 2, gifts are limited to $50 per person per giver. And you're going to see the pattern here. This is a very simply stated rule, but there is some complexity. The next slide. What is a gift? So there are 2 questions under this rule. The first question, is it a gift? Is it even within this rule? So we have to ask ourselves, is it a gift? And the second thing we have to ask ourselves, is this a violation of the gift rule? So first we're going to talk about definition of gift. A gift is something of economic value, a thing, or a discount. A discount can be some of economic value. Given to the public official's relative, or a member of your household, without receiving value back, not given to the general public on the same terms. So that is a gift. So an example, say you go to a conference and you get a goodie bag as you walk in. And they're giving goodie bags to everyone who attends the conference. Well, this conference is a Star Wars conference. You're a big Star Wars nut, and you've got your lightsaber on your belt, and you're walking into this conference, and you get your goodie bag with some really cool figurines, and it's free. So your goodie bag is something of economic value, given to you, the public official, without receiving anything back. This was a free conference, free Star Wars conference, not given to the general public on the same terms. Well, we missed, not that one for here, because you are there as a Star Wars fan. You're not there as a counselor, and this gift is going to everyone. Now let's switch that up a little bit. Say you are going to a conference, and it's actually the League of Oregon Cities conference, and you get a goodie bag. Now the only people getting a goodie bag are public officials, because it's a League of Oregon Cities conference. And so everyone walking through that door is a public official. The members of the public want to go to the League of Oregon Cities. People at the big security guards at the front say, no, this is for city councilors only. And so the only reason you're getting that goodie bag is because you are a public official. So that is a gift. So that's the distinction there. It may not violate the gift rule, but that is a gift. So the first question, is it a gift? Second question, does it violate the gift rule? So what is the gift rule? The gift rule is you or your relative. So again, we're looking after our relatives, so we have to think about the gifts that we're receiving, but also gifts that our spouse is receiving. Cannot ask for or receive gifts over $50 from any single source in one calendar year. And number 4 is the big one that saves us. If your source has an interest in your official action, and you are city councilors, your official action almost universally is the stuff that happens on the dais, your votes. You actually don't have a lot of authority in the city, except for up on the dais. You don't get to give orders to staff. You don't even really hardly make recommendations to staff, and individually you really don't do much, except for the very important job of voting. And so your official action is your decision or your vote. So when you went to that LOC conference, LOC was giving goodie bags. If it was over $50, I would be surprised, but let's just say it was over $50. Does the LOC have an interest in your official actions? Maybe, but probably not. Staff has signed you up to attend that conference. LOC is providing you a service by educating you. They're not really interested in what the city council for Creswell is voting on. So that would not, even if it was over $50, and even though you were only getting it because you were a city councilor, it's likely not a violation of the gift rule because of number 4. The source of the gift has to have an interest in your official actions, your vote.
Good question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this, for the gift rule, all 4 would have to be in effect? It can't just be 1 or?
Absolutely, yeah,
Thank you.
yep.
Okay.
Yeah, these are ands. Yeah, great question. So maybe an example that I saw several years ago when I was working for the city of Eugene. City of Eugene had this big track meet come to town several years back, and the promoters of this track meet wanted to give the Eugene City Council track meet tickets. Very generous, worth more than $50. for that track meet, believe you. But they had an interest in the official actions of the city council because this track meet was receiving city money and hopefully receiving a lot of city money. City law enforcement was there, city planning was involved, public works was involved, and so there was a big partnership between the promoters of this event and city staff. And so we had to tell our city councilors, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to turn down those tickets. That would be a gift. Yes.
Well, it happened to ask a question. So.
I saw you're starting to sweat a little bit.
If, just another scenario with that, if the city had not been giving money for the track meet, would that change that?
Yeah,
Could
absolutely.
they have accepted the free tickets and if they had not been doing anything that benefited the organization?
Yeah, so we can change the facts just a little bit, so maybe it wasn't the city council for Eugene, it was the city council for Creswell. Maybe those track promoters came down here and say, we just, we wanna get people from the surrounding community to our event, and we'd like you to be seen there. But they have no interest in the planning for Creswell. They're not asking you for money, so that would not be a gift.
Okay, thanks.
Or a violation of the gift rule.
would we still have to claim that though at the end of the year with the ethics board for the state of Oregon?
No.
Okay.
And there are some exceptions.
Of course.
So this one, and I'll just, little side note, these are statutes. They're written by legislators who work in Salem. And there are a whole bunch of exceptions here. And almost none of them apply to you as city councilors. A lot of them apply to legislators. It's, funny how that works. So a gift is not a campaign contribution. So I know a lot of you have received campaign contributions, but not at the same level as a legislator. So someone who signs a $500 check to someone who's running for state senate, that's not a gift. Even if that person has a lot of interest in what the state legislature does. Statutory, legislative drafting. Presents from your relatives or someone in your household is not a gift. So if your spouse gives you a nice tie, do people wear ties anymore? I'm not sure. A nice jacket, even if your spouse has an interest in what you're doing on the city council, that would not be a gift because we're allowed to give each other presents. That was actually an exception that was created during my practice, and so when I first started practicing, there were questions about whether you could give your spouse a gift or not. It was not a fun time in Oregon.
Ridiculous.
Yes.
I'll say the word out loud, I don't care.
All right, thank you. You read between the lines there. Then the other, some other exceptions here. It's not really worth going into a lot of detail here, but suffice to say, if you think you have a gift problem, if you're receiving something of over $50 from someone who has an interest in what you're doing, that's where you say, hey, I've got some questions. And we reach out to staff, we reach out to the city attorney's office, and we figure it out for you. Some other exceptions, 2 pages of exceptions. Informational material related to your official duties. So you're allowed to receive booklets and packets of information, even if they're really glossy and high cost packets of information. Part of a customary private business practice. So this is actually, it's hard to tell from the words, but there were some doctors in the legislature who received a lot of gifts from pharmaceutical companies. They were receiving those gifts from pharmaceutical companies as part of their private business, not because they were legislators. So we had to make an exception to, make sure those doctors were okay. All right, that's rule number 2, gifts. Rule number 3, confront your conflicts of interest. And this kind of goes along with the handout that's in the packet, the 2-pager that kind of walks through some pretty good detail in terms of how the Government Ethics Commission would like you to analyze a conflict of interest, and we're going to go through it ourselves here. So a conflict of interest is the distinction between an actual conflict and a potential conflict. So those are the words that we use, the OGEC uses, actual versus potential. In layman's words and real words, that means something will happen or something could happen. So that's the distinction we're looking at. All right, so let's talk about what is an actual conflict of interest. An actual conflict of interest is an action, decision, or recommendation by you, a city councilor, that will result in a financial benefit or a financial detriment to you, the city councilor, or a relative, your spouse, or a business with which you are associated, so your employer. Notice it says that will result in a financial benefit or detriment. So if you are on the dais making a decision that benefits your employer, that will benefit your employer, that is an actual conflict of interest. If you are on that dais making a decision that will harm your employer, that will cause a financial detriment to your employer, that too is an actual conflict of interest. So we don't really care whether you're helping your employer or hurting your employer. So you can be bad at being unethical and still get in trouble. Oh, I thought I was helping my employer. No, you're actually really hurting your employer, but it's still a problem.
Now, if that's specifically just for your employer, say you vote on something that's going to affect all the businesses, including my employer.
Right, yeah. So that's where we have some exceptions.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. All right, so that's actual. Will cause a benefit. Potential conflict is an action, decision, or recommendation. So one of your votes by a city councilor, by you, a public official, that could result in a financial benefit or detriment. So this is could, we're not sure. And so the Government Ethics Commission here actually does give us a little bit of a bone by saying the will, the actual, is certain. You have to be certain that A leads to B, that your decision leads to financial benefit or detriment. And everything else, if it's could, then it's a potential. And we're gonna talk about why that's important. Because when you are faced with one of these actual or potential, what you do on the dais is you state the nature of your conflict. So you say, I'm employed by Apple Computer, and our decision today is going to benefit or could benefit Mr. Jobs and Apple Computer. And you do that before you vote, and you do that before. I love it at the very when the agenda item comes up, you raise your hand, you get recognized by the mayor, or you even tell the mayor beforehand, hey, I have to announce a conflict. Can you help me out by calling on me first thing? The mayor will call on you, and you announce the nature of the conflict, and you do it on the record, so it's in writing, on audio, and you have to do it each time. So if that agenda item comes up more than once, at one meeting, so you talk about it at a work session, and then you do it at the regular meeting, you have to announce that conflict both times.
Does that need to be reported at all to Organ Ethics?
It does not need to be reported.
Just needs to
no.
be stated out loud and on the minutes?
We just want it on the record because that's the first question they will ask. If there's a complaint, is they will say, can I see the minutes?
Okay.
And that's why Caitlin is our best friend in those situations.
What if you had a situation where perhaps your potential conflict of interest would span multiple meetings, not just one work session, does it have to be brought up at every single instance?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so, I just
Yeah.
wanted to confirm.
No, it's a great question, and yeah, so you get in the mayor's radar and you say, hey, this agenda item's coming up again, I'm gonna have to announce again. And so it's in the importance between actual versus potential here, the will versus could is important, because with an actual, you have to do all that stuff. You have to state the nature of the conflict, and you have to do it at the beginning of the agenda item, you have to do it each time. But with an actual conflict, that means you can't participate. So no voting, no participation in the discussions, and you're essentially recusing yourself from that agenda item. But for a potential, you can still participate, you can still vote. So if we're unsure whether what we're doing up here will impact my employer, Apple Computer, but it could, we're making decisions here about software, and it could impact Apple Computer, but we're not sure if it will or not. I'll announce a potential conflict, and then be part of the discussion and be part of the vote. And we've got it on the record, so everything is there. If there's someone in the audience says, I think that's some hanky going on, well, let's read the record. It's here in writing, in black and white, and we'll send that to the Government Ethics Commission. And they'll say, oh, yeah, looks like they stated the nature of the conflict, and they did it before the agenda item. Good for them. Dismissed. And it is important to note that stating the nature of the conflict is more than just saying, I have a conflict. You have to state why you have a conflict, the nature of the conflict. So I'd have to raise my hand and say, my spouse works for Apple Computer, and the decision we're making today may impact Apple Computer. I'm stating a potential conflict. It doesn't need to be verbose, but you need to actually explain a little bit.
So if that happens and somebody comes to me, is that my decision, or do I have to report that at all? Or how does that work to make sure that I'm following the same rules? If there is a conflict, and clearly we believe it to be a conflict as a council with the city manager, does that need to be reported? Or is it we just take action with the minutes, state why that she might be recusing herself?
So
What do I need to do as mayor or city manager? How do we approach that?
So if we think there is a conflict issue coming up at a future meeting, we can meet as a team to try to get ahead of it.
Okay.
And maybe intervene a little bit, explain with the third person.
To reach
why-
out to you basically and
Yeah.
see if you, okay.
Yeah, but it's not on your shoulder. That's a kind of a courtesy thing,
Okay.
because we're colleagues here and we work together.
Yeah,
And that's how we work. But at the end of the day, it's each individual's responsibility.
okay.
So, yeah, there have certainly been times where I've seen counselors say, I think you have an actual conflict, and the person said, I think I don't. Well, that's your call. If you think you don't, then you get to live with the consequences, but that's your decision.
Okay.
And here's the exception that gets to your question a little bit. So it is not a conflict of interest if you are a member of a class that is so large that it impacts everyone equally. The important thing to know there is we don't get to declare when a class is a class. Only the Ethics Commission gets to define when a class is a class, and they have done some of that. So we know that when we're making land use decisions or we're changing our land use legislation, our code, that impacts all residential development in the city. You know, if we all own homes in Creswell, it's impacting everyone the same. And we've heard from the Ethics Commission that that is not an actual conflict. It could be a potential. But if we have some questions on the margins, that's where we need to get up in front of it. And so if you see a conflict coming, it's best to jump on it and get in touch with us, and we can work on that, because we need to get on the agenda for the Government Ethics Commission, and they meet every 6 weeks, I think. So we need to know ahead of time to get it on their agenda, and they can decide whether that's a class or not. The other big exception is if you are, is membership in a 501c3. So the classic example here is if you are on the board for Habitat for Humanity. So you are a volunteer board member for Habitat for Humanity. The city is going to buy or sell a piece of property. The city is going to sell a piece of property to Habitat for Humanity for $2. Habitat for Humanity would love to buy that property from the city, would love to build a house for someone in the community, and you are a city councilor and a board member. Because you're a volunteer board member, that is by definition not a conflict of interest. So but that is not, you don't even have to declare it. That's just not a conflict. Because the statute says if a conflict arises because of your membership in a 501c3, then that's not a conflict. Another great reason to always raise your hand and ask questions if you see something coming. We can help you through it. All right, we're going to cruise through public meetings and then a couple slides on public records. All right, public meetings. A meeting is the convening of a governing body, of a public body, for which a quorum is required in order to make a decision or deliberate towards a decision on any matter. So that's a lot of mumbo jumbo. We're going to talk about what convening means, and we're going to talk about what deliberate means. But just extra background, a governing body is you, the city council. A public body is the city. You are a governing body of a public body, city council of Creswell. So this applies to you as a city council. So what does it mean to convene? The term convene means gathering in a physical location. What we're doing right here, this is convening. We are meeting as the city council for Creswell, using a video, virtual attendance. So a Zoom meeting is a meeting. So if none of you are in the same room, but you're all on the same Zoom protocol, that is a meeting. Using serial electronic written communication among participants. That is the classic reply all email. That can create a meeting. So if you get an email from your city manager describing here's the agenda for next week, there are some important discussions we're going to have, and you reply all and you say, I'm going to vote no on all this crap. Well, we may have just had a meeting because you were deliberating by telling everyone how you're going to vote. So that's why reply all is dangerous.
I'm always concerned that I'm going to hit reply all and say thank you. I'm very cautious with this, but if that happens someday, God forbid, what do I do in that sort of circumstance?
Well, so I would argue that saying thank you is not a deliberation.
Okay.
So which is the next slide. Great segue, thank you very much. The term deliberation means a discussion or communication that is part of a decision-making process. So the decision-making process is pretty broad, but it includes fact-gathering, discussions and deliberations, and of course it actually means the actual voting too. So all of that stuff, that deliberation, has to occur in a properly scheduled and noticed public meeting. So if you're convening, which could mean email, and it could mean intermediary. We didn't talk a little bit about that. So intermediary is another thing. So say Councilor A talks to Councilor B, and then Councilor B talks to Councilor C. Well, none of us are in the same room, and maybe none of it was electronic, but we've used Councilor B as an intermediary between A and C. And so that could be a problem too. So if you start sharing your opinion on a matter with your fellow councilors, even though it's just one-on-one, that's not a quorum, that's not a problem, that's not a legal problem. But what you're doing is you're giving up your opinion maybe, and you're having your colleague act as an intermediary if that colleague then turns around and starts talking to other people. So we're in a bit of a bind about how to get stuff done, but the best advice is do it here. Do it on the dais. Some exceptions. If we're talking about purely factual or educational items of nature and there's no deliberation, so the classic scenario of maybe going to an LOC conference and there's 4 of you in the same conference room, but you're learning about public meetings law. We're not talking about City of Creswell business. So the 4 of you can be in that conference room because it's purely a factual or educational in nature. The trouble we get into is if we do a retreat as a council and we go off-site and we don't notice it and we don't schedule it, and it's meant to be a retreat about learning about our different speaking styles and things like that, but we ask questions of the presenter about, hey, how does that speaking style apply to paving projects? For instance, the 2nd Street thing. I've got a question about that. So all of a sudden this purely factual and educational thing be turned into a meeting where we're talking about something that is city business. Another exception. An issue that has at any time would probably not come before you. So this is the classic. This exception actually, I call it the social exception. So if you are at the bar talking with your fellow counselors about football practice, about a birthday party, about something that would never come before the city council, your favorite barbecue recipe, those are all things that would never occur at a city council meeting, and it's not related to your job at all, so that is not a meeting issue. Could be a perception issue if someone from the community saw 4 counselors at the bar, even though legally there was nothing wrong, but maybe that could be a perception issue. The last exception is something that is non-substantive in nature, such as scheduling or saying thank you. I think this is an exception. So if you get an email from the city manager that says, Tuesday is no good, can we do Wednesday? And everyone hits reply all saying, yes, I can do Wednesday, no, I can't do Wednesday, how about 4 o'clock, how about 5 o'clock? And there's this big web of emails back and forth about what time and when to meet. Well, that's all about scheduling. That is not a problem. So there is some sanity here. I would like to point out, I mentioned briefly at the start, as a city council, you are required to have public meetings training. And this is put on by the Government Ethics Commission. The League of Oregon Cities has been approved to do this training as well, so you can do it through LOC. But you have to do it once per term. Sorry, Mayor, that means once every 2 years. For the rest of you, it's once every 4 years. So he's going to be twice as good at public meetings as the rest of you.
We already took that then when we came on, probably, or is this new?
This is new as of, I think they didn't start approving trainings until January. So if you haven't done it in the last five months or so, then it's going to be new for you.
Oh, interesting, okay.
And it's a brutal 2 hours. But it's all good stuff you should know about.
Ross, did you read the thing about the league advising members not to go through that training?
Yeah,
Up to the point because of some of the things that they're saying is a misinterpretation of the rules?
Yeah, so there is currently a little bit of, well, so right now we're in the middle of the legislative session. And I always try to stay out of Salem during the legislative session. People get testy. They've been drinking too much coffee, staying up too late, working too hard. And so right now we have a little bit of dispute between LOC and the Government Ethics Commission. There are a couple issues where Government Ethics Commission has given advice that LOC doesn't agree with.
I agree with LOC.
Yeah, and so the problem we have is we have statute and rules that give authority to Government Ethics Commission to enforce these rules against you all. And so we're kind of, we can believe LOC and say, okay, we're not going to do this training, but LOC is not going to pay your fine. The enforcement action is going to come against you. And so I would go to the LOC training. That would be my first priority. And if you can't make that, then sit through the 2 hours of Government Ethics Commission training. That's my recommendation.
Did I sign something when I came onto council saying that I agreed to be forced to do these extra trainings?
I don't know if you did or not.
I don't remember doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that's something we need to have a conversation about with the Oregon Ethics Commission and LOC.
Yeah, well,
I didn't sign up for that. I'm 2.5 years in.
yeah.
Well, especially if they change it. I
Yeah,
definitely did it
I'm
once already.
not doing it.
Definitely did it once already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a question back here.
Oh,
Ross, can you just speak to the fact that the city can't represent, you're on your own dime for any ethics violation?
yeah,
Good
yeah.
call.
So, yeah, that's
Rude awakening.
right. Yeah,
Way to pipe up, Shelley.
Been there, done that.
that's right. Yeah, so that is good to know, and that's why you can ask me questions up front, and that's why we want to get in front of this stuff. And so if you have a question, you need to raise it as soon as possible. But if it is about something in the past, that's where we can't help anymore, and especially if a complaint is filed. And the reason I can't help you is because I'm paid by the city. And if you are receiving that benefit, you are receiving a free benefit of free legal advice about an individual issue. So if you get dinged by the Ethics Commission, you're going to have to pay out of pocket. The city's not going to pick up the tab. We do have insurance, and insurance will provide some benefit, up to, I believe it's now $5,000, but they only reimburse after the fact if the complaint is dismissed on the merits.
7,500.
Oh, is it so?
As long as you have no.
We're talking about an actual ethics violation complaint now, right? Not just
Yeah.
not
Yes.
completing the
Right.
training.
So if you get a complaint,
Okay.
then you have to hire your own attorney if that's how
Right.
you so choose. But you have to pay, and CIS will pay up to $7,500 of your attorney fee, so long as you have no fine. You can have a letter of education, but so long as there is no monetary fine attached, they will pay the $7,500, and then you're on the hook for the rest.
As a reimbursement still though? It's after the fact?
No, my attorney directly invoiced
Oh.
them.
That's great. That's
So the
new.
other $5,000 was
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah.
Do we have a time frame that has to be completed?
Within the term, so you have 4 years.
Oh, okay. All right then.
Yeah. Unless you were appointed to a partial term. So I would say it's with whatever your term of office is. All right, I'm at my time, but I'm gonna go very quickly through these last few slides because,
One quick question on the quorum, has that changed? 4 is the quorum, 3 counselors in one
Depends
place?
on how many people there are.
for you all, for this body, yeah, four is the quorum.
Okay,
Yep. Yeah, and that's out of your charter. That's actually not state law, it's local law, it's from your charter.
I just want to make sure that, whether the precedent was it our charter or state? Because
Yep. All right, these are my bullet items, practical tips. This is not really the law, this is my best practice. This is things that I highlight for you to try to stay out of trouble on public meetings issues. And one I referenced, be aware of public perception. So sometimes it can be perfectly legal, but if the public thinks something is smelly, then it's just going to stir up trouble and cause problems. And so I advise not meeting at the bar right after a council meeting. There's nothing wrong with that. You can socialize with your colleagues, but right after a council meeting, does that look good? I also advise during a recess, so you're having a long meeting and you recess to go to the restroom, don't have the sidebars. Or if you do have a sidebar, make it very obvious that you're talking about your barbecue recipe or your football game. Let's not have those sidebars about city business. I think Creswell does a good job on the second one, keep it formal, but simplify the rules. I think you just do great on the dais. I really applaud you all, and you have been doing that for quite a while. You keep things going, you're respectful to each other, you don't speak over each other, and you have some pretty simple rules about how that process runs, and it teaches everyone else in the room how we're doing business here. Public participation does not mean a public conversation. And so there are points in the agenda for public comment. It is not shouts from the audience at all times. And that's the mayor's role there to try to keep that in check. Again, this city does a great job and you all do a good job. Controlling the public at a public meeting. People are allowed their First Amendment rights, so they can have a sign in the back of the room if they want, as long as they are not actually disturbing the meeting or disrupting the meeting. They can practice their First Amendment rights. So if they're out there shouting you down, that's actual conflicting with the meeting. And so we can say, you need to be quiet or we're going to ask you to leave. But if someone is standing up in the back with a t-shirt that says, go home, Mayor.
Why can't it be the greatest mayor ever? Why can't it be the bad thing?
I just
Why does it gotta go negative?
Because I know you're so sensitive.
I think, a tear coming out.
And so all this leads to the last one, get comfortable having those discussions in public. And again, you guys do a great job of that. If you have a full discussion up there on the dais, then the public understands, oh, this is them doing their business. They're having the discussion here. They're changing minds. I can see how they're going to vote. Have that discussion here. You're all colleagues. You can take it. If someone disagrees with you, you can still shake their hand at the end of the meeting. Really quickly on public records. What is a public record? Everything is a public record, regardless of physical form, if it's related to city business. So you all have a handout here of my presentation. If there's no writing on it, then it's just one copy. We have one handout, and I've already given it to Caitlin. That's the record. But if you've taken notes on it, that's now a new public record. And Oregon law favors disclosure. This is not a confidentiality law, it's a sunshine law. And so that's the default. If it's a public record, the default is it goes out to the public. We lawyers will argue and help protect the city about disclosing things we don't want to have disclosed, but the default is it's public. And this is where our city recorder comes in. Our city recorder is the records custodian. She receives public records requests, and she has a tight timeline to respond. And so if any of those records are held by you, and you get an email from your city recorder saying, hey, I need this record, I need that record, you need to respond. You need to help us out. And so this is my last slide. These are my practical tips. This is not the law. These are my practical tips on how to survive public records law. Avoid using city email, use city email for city business. Use private email for private business. Keep that distinction. If you keep that distinction, then the perception is that you're doing private on private and public on public, and there's no question. We can argue the details if we get a complaint, but this is the best practice. I would avoid texting for city business. It's so convenient these days to text for city business, but it really creates a headache for our records custodian, and it creates a headache for litigation if it should ever come to that, because it's hard to retain those texts. Sometimes your phone just deletes them, and a year later, they're not there, and all of a sudden you've destroyed public records. So to the extent we can, avoid texting. which goes with the next bullet, limit creation of public records. So if you are able to take it all in without taking notes, you can certainly take notes. I'm not dissuading you from taking notes if that's your style. But if you can avoid it, then you've just avoided creating a public record. And then you've made records custodian's job a little bit easier. And lastly, just want to reemphasize, if you get the email from our city recorder saying, I need some help with this records request, please respond. Because we do. We have tight timelines, and sometimes we have busy attorneys who need to get involved, and we need to figure things out, and so we need that universe of records as soon as possible. I went over. I apologize, Mayor. But
Next time, you owe me 8 minutes. Take it off the bill.
Not telling them that you're the good mayor, yeah.
Thanks, Ross.
Thanks, Mayor.
Appreciate it. Has anybody got any questions before he walks away? Anything we forgot about? Wanted to ask? No? Thanks, Ross.
thank you.
All right. So those are gonna be item number 3, and we're gonna executive session pursuant to ORS 192.6602H. We're gonna go to executive session.
Can we pretend that we've done it already and just go home?
No? Well, actually, it was the process.
I'm just glad to see you. I was like, he's okay. Once you were here, it's like, that's, it's.
Work is just insane. My bad. Sorry, Mayor. I
How
missed
dare
it.
you?
He has to leave for you to do this.
We need Joan.
Joan? What?
Joan?
Joan!
What are we doing?
Did she
Oh,
leave?
yes, Joan.
Did you leave?
She leave?
Alonzo arrived at
She might have-
7:24 PM,
Wait,
just,
hold on, okay.
Alonzo arrived at 7:24 PM, slightly late, but was here.
Joan left at,
Joan ditched out at 8:09-ish? Roll that, are we good?
We ended without her?
All right, we're gonna end it without.
Okay.
Meeting adjourned.
All righty.